I'm Craig Thielen, and this is the 1% Better podcast. Today I'm speaking with Souheil Badran, the Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at US Bank. Welcome to the 1% Better podcast, Souheil.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me.
And I can see your background's in beautiful downtown Milwaukee, so beautiful background and city that we were just talking about.
It is an absolutely beautiful city. I wish I could give you a better and sunnier day, but I will take it with no rain.
Well, speaking of location, Souheil, maybe we should just start with you and a little background. Where were you born? Where were you raised? And a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Craig. Excited to be here. Just as a background, I was born in Lebanon, and throughout, before coming to the U.S. in '85 to come to college, lived in Kuwait. My dad had his own business, so we moved there for a while. Then went back to Lebanon. Unfortunately, we decided to move, I should say, right as the Civil War started in 1975.
Okay.
So we diverted to a small island between Italy and North Africa called Malta. Lived there for a couple of years. Then went back to Lebanon, thinking that the war was over, but ended up doing a boomerang and went back and finished school in Malta in 1983 before coming to the US. And it was primarily because of the war. So many of my friends, we all left all the same age, around the same time. But thanks to technology, we're able to stay in touch through WhatsApp and Facebook and a couple other social media. So you feel like you haven't lost a beat. But yeah, I came here in 1985 to Milwaukee, actually.
Okay.
And went to a small university here for my undergraduate, ended up getting my graduate degree there. Met my wife in 1986, got married in 1990, and we'll be celebrating 34 years this year with 3 beautiful girls.
Congratulations.
And, we call Milwaukee home.
Yeah, very nice. Well, that's quite a story. And of course, things have evolved in Lebanon. And now, of course, they're also, I think, part of some of the war activities and some of the things. So it's been kind of a roller coaster ever since you left, hasn't it?
It has been. It's settled down for a while, but it's unfortunate what's happening, across the world, not just in the Middle East.
Yes.
And all you can do is hope and pray that sound minds make a decision and things stop. I was hoping to see peace in my lifetime. I continue to hope so.
Yeah, well, we all do. I met another gentleman that's from Lebanon, and I always am very curious about every country, and he just described it being such a beautiful, wonderful country. And, so someday I hope to visit, and hopefully that things can recover here soon and we can make that happen. Well, let's talk about a little bit more kind of getting you up to current. So you came to the Milwaukee area, you've lived here, as you said, ever since, and really got into financial services. So let's maybe come up to speed with where we are now. Financial services, banking, is a lot's going on, a lot of changes. Maybe just describe kind of the state of your industry and some of the disruptions and trends that you see happening now and into the coming years here.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I mean, we absolutely have come a long way. Financial services was this quiet banking system all around, and that's really where I started my career as a developer, believe it or not, coding on mainframes back then.
Of course.
And, I'm not shy to mention the year, which was 1990. And things obviously have changed, right? We've moved into what we know now as a cloud environment. But believe it or not, we still have mainframes. There's still good workforces that carry a lot of load. And I think, the transition really, if you think about banking, I'm not sure whether we're still banks or technology companies, because we have such a high dependency on technology. So it's something we keep an eye on every single day, right? And especially now with the last couple of years with what's happening with AI, what can we do with generative AI, predictive AI? I think that really keeps us, looking ahead versus being able to say, oh, yeah, we're stable, things are good. So that's an area that we keep an eye on. But if you think about the topics themselves, there are still some historical things. People thought checks were dead many, many years ago. Guess what? Even with the likes of Zelle, people are still writing checks.
I just wrote one last week.
There you go. I used to joke that the only time I wrote checks was for my kids' tuition. But even now, electronic payments are really kicking in. So the areas really are, have opened up through technology, whether it's wire transfers, ACH, things are moving, real-time payments, things are moving much quicker now versus the traditional, write a check, wait for 4 or 5 days. We're moving now to real-time payments, and that's an area that's really exciting. But at the same time, you have to keep an eye on, fraud, cybersecurity, making sure that you're paying the right person. The second part is, kind of like what we think about is traditionally, we're doing a lot of things on spreadsheets. And you think about with the innovation that's going on with automation, what we're able to find is really work with the teams that are on the ground and saying, what are some of the things that you're doing day to day? What can we take away from you that you would consider manual, whether it's 20, 30, 40% of your daily work? And how can we automate that so you can really focus on the important things? And when I say it, it's really a collaboration. And I think that's part of the leadership discussion that we'll talk about, is really enabling the team to raise their hand and say, you know what, Souheil, we spend X number of hours a day on reconciliation. We think that if you brought in the right process inside this team and we're able to automate it, we can then make sure that we're just focused on the results and making sure that, we see it through and we can spend more time on other things. And so, you can set the theme at the top, but the reality is it's really being hands-on and working with the teams on the ground that are doing the day-to-day efforts that you really see the productivity.
You covered a number of topics there. I want to come back to the innovation piece, but I want to stay a little bit on sort of just what's going on in the banking world, because I think a lot of people, frankly, want to know. I mean, everyone has some relationship with a bank still, and we all need financial services. So, two topics that I know me personally, and I know a lot of people have a lot of interest in, because we hear a lot about it, which is crypto, digital currency, and then kind of separately financial fraud. So maybe just on the crypto digital currency, I mean, obviously we all know about Bitcoin, and we know there's lots of things available. We hear that, digital currency is we're kind of inching our way as a country possibly to move into digital currency. But just what would you say to maybe the average person, is crypto a place that they should be interacting with, and digital currency, is it still too early? If so, how would you suggest people do that, relative to kind of the more traditional mechanisms that we're all used to?
I would say, number one, no matter what new technology, get educated on it, right? And then if you're willing to make that investment as part of your portfolio, by all means. I mean, I'm speaking on the personal side. I invest in cryptocurrency, and I've seen the ups and downs. But I also know that, there were times when I was in the red, and then you see the bounce and you're back in. So because it's not backed by anything solid, it's a risk, right? It's a higher risk than many, I'm not going to go as far as CDs and getting 4 or 5%, but equities, right? So it really depends on your tolerance. But I think the number one is get educated, and please, please, please do not get influenced by somebody on social media that's standing in front of a Ferrari telling you how they made their money, because I guarantee you that's probably leased or rented, so they can get your money, right? So you've got to be very, very careful, because again, you can't get it back, right? And you got to be very careful who you're paying, when you're paying, how much you're paying if you're using crypto. If I think about it from a banking perspective, it's something we're keeping an eye on, right? But it's not something that we're necessarily funding, backing up right now.
Okay.
There's no proper, regulation. I mean, even at the federal level, people are still discussing, like, how do you track it?
Okay.
And unfortunately, again, same as any new environment, you're seeing some of the bad stories out there. And that gives you a pause to say, all right, am I going to put my money in an exchange, and will I see that money ever again? Because we've seen some of the losses that were incurred by professional investors even.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious what your perspective is, because I mean, crypto's been around for a while now, and it seems like the US government, as you're alluding to, we've been pretty conservative relative to many other countries that have sort of gotten more involved with supporting, backing, having some of those things. I think South Korea is very active with it, and a handful of maybe European countries. So is that just kind of, was that surprising you that here we are 10, plus years into it and we're still kind of at the ground level with it? Or is that what you'd expected?
No, I'm glad you mentioned South Korea because, yeah, again, having done international work in the past, including South Korea, a lot of it, honestly, Craig, depends on the banking system. So if you think about the United States, back in, at least when I started my career in the early 90s, we had about 14,000 financial institutions. Now we're under 5,000. But think about certain markets where you have, somewhere between 5 and 10 banks that have the opportunity to offer services to 80% of the market. That collaboration is tighter, right? That collaboration, you can make decisions faster. You can set rules or regulations a little bit faster. And the same holds true for countries like South Korea, Nordics, et cetera. And so I think it really depends on, can you bring the community, if you will, around to agree on certain processes, certain regulations, and I think that helps expedite. So right now, I think the fact that we're a little bit more dispersed, for lack of better terms, probably puts us in a little bit watch and improve along the way before we get to a final decision.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And we obviously have one of the largest markets in the world. So let some others go first and kind of work out the kinks, and we can watch them right from the sidelines, and then we can go from there, right? Well, another topic, Souheil, is, and again, this is, I just want to bring up some really relevant topics, and that's financial fraud. And it's astounding. I mean, I don't think it's a matter of if that, a person's going to have something occur. It's just a matter of when, just like organizations, like if you don't think it's happened to you yet, you just are not aware of it. I know I had personally something happen where there was some financial fraud, and it was scary and astounding, and federal authorities got involved, type of thing. So a lot more about that than the average person, obviously, and how incredibly pervasive it is. Any advice or just awareness for folks out there and how big this challenge is and what they can do to sort of prevent themselves from being in a bad position?
Yeah, let me start with the advice, because similar to you, we've gone through it. A couple of years ago, my wife was on a road trip, actually during COVID. She drove, our middle daughter lives in Denver. She drove along the way, and she only used her debit card once. And all of a sudden we get a call from a bank saying, are you responsible for all these charges? And they're all somewhere between $85 to $350, but there were about 18 or 19 of them.
Wow.
That came up to about $5,000-$6,000 basically at the time. And luckily the bank reversed all of them, realizing it wasn't fraud. I would say sign up for organizations. I don't mind mentioning them. LifeLock is a great example, would be one. And probably there are a couple more, Experian and others. Second is make sure you put a lock on your credit bureau file. That too. Third is please change your passwords on a regular basis, or use one of the password tools that are out there where they basically provide passwords to whatever site you're on that you don't even remember, but you have that master password. So I think those are the three that I would do right away, and just keep an eye on your statements. We've become so automated that you tend to forget to look like in the past, what did I write? But there are tools out there, whether it's Credit Karma, and those are, all tools that I use. But use the tools that are available to keep an eye on your transactions to make sure there's nothing funky out there. In terms
go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Ask your question.
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say it's, kind of going back to, you mentioned checks. I mean, back in the day, we used to balance a checkbook and you could see every transaction. And now because of automation, and by the way, sometimes we do think of banks as sort of being, kind of legacy technology, mainframes, slow to adopt. But in other cases, I know this is leading edge. My first use of technology in a meaningful way on the internet was, I would say, mid 1990s, maybe 94, 93, 94-ish. And it was with a bank. And I forget what the technology is called, but you had a modem, a 1200 baud modem, and it would be just text, and it was like a board. But I could do transactions. I could see my balance, and I could type in a code word, and then it would give me my balance. And and I could actually do some basic transaction. That's over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that was my first, like, wow, I can do stuff electronically. Well, now everything is so automated and electronic. Stuff can happen, you don't even know about it. So to your point, just pay attention, actually read your statements. We have to go back to that, right?
I think there are a couple of things you have to keep an eye on, and it ties back to your second part of the question, or the first part, I should say, which is, across the globe, not just financial services, you're seeing a lot of databases being stolen or held ransom, right? You get notifications from your financial institution or others if you're subscribed that says, hey, we noticed that your email, user ID, password have been exposed. And so unfortunately for the black hats or the hackers, that's become a full-time job where they're able to find a way to get your data. And that's what I mean by keep an eye on your transactions. For anybody working in the financial services industry, there are fraud teams, and that's all they do all day. And there's a lot of investments happening to make sure that, whether or not it is you, does your transaction look familiar? Is it being done in a way that's outside of your norm? Is it something that you're overspending on that isn't really you, that you haven't done this in the past in an environment that you haven't? At the same time, you still see check fraud, right? And people opening up mailboxes. So it's not one area where fraud is happening. It's still happening in traditional methods, but also now in the world that we live in an online world where you're signing up for services that you think you believe. Phishing attempts are still happening. Unfortunately, the elderly are getting at the fact, for lack of better terms. Yep. There's a good movie called The Beekeeper with Jason Statham. A little bit violent movie, but I would take a look at it. I mean, it's somebody that a professional organization that targets the elderly and says, hey, there's a virus on your account, give us your password, we'll fix it for you. And that they drain their accounts, right? So these are things that are still happening, and financial institutions, but even, let me pause there. It used to be that you had one dealing with the bank, but right now through the technology, if you use any of your, and I'm not gonna ask who you bank with, but if you think about how you concentrate, whether it's your brokerage account, your bank, your lending, a lot of it is coming to one portal, and a lot of that stuff happening through APIs. What that means is it's not just your institution that has to protect itself, but it's also the third parties. And those are things that many in the financial services world are working together to make sure that the whole ecosystem is being protected.
Well, I'm sure it's a full-time job for you guys, and as soon as you create a better lock, then they create a better key, and it's a constant race. So I commend you because it's a big challenge, I know. But let's shift gears. Thanks for that. I think that's helpful. Maybe talk a little bit more about you. You've worn a lot of different hats in your career. Everything from, as you said, you were a developer. You've done marketing, operations, technology, innovation. So a lot of different experience you've had, and I got to imagine all of that plays into your current role. And I know you've mentioned to me in the past, you're very appreciative that you've had that broad, diverse background. So I'm just curious, is that somewhat intentional for yourself? And would you recommend others try to wear as many hats and get as well-rounded, or how did that happen?
I'm going to give you the same answer I gave you on cryptocurrency. It depends on the individual.
Okay.
It's funny. Luckily, I've been able to mentor a few people in my career, especially the last probably 8 to 10 years. It really depends on the individual. And what I mean by that is I have friends that we started our careers together as developers. They've been with the same organization, 30 plus years now. I look at their career and, it's always greener on the other side. I think, look, part of, again, I'll speak for me personally, part of what got me to where I am today is that curiosity, if you will, right? I knew early in my career that I wanted to figure out, when I was a programmer, I wanted to know what I was programming for. So I went into product management. That got me involved with clients to understand what they were looking for. Once we developed product, that got me into product marketing. Okay, now that we have something, how do you get it out there? And then I knew at some point I wanted to be in management and running organizations. And so I had some good mentors along the way. And they said, well, do you have any P&L experience? I said, no. What would I need to get there? So I got into real product management, looking at products from beginning to end. And that helped me, that's where I got my MBA as well. That helped me in my career at the time. So there's always that curiosity on why are we doing what we're doing? And that led me into other things. So my advice to others would be, I've got some friends who are still in the technology realm, right? The technology path. And they went from being individual developers to leading teams of developers, and now going from mainframes into clouds and data and AI, right? A lot of it on the tech path. So my advice would be, in a sense, follow your passion, follow what your interest is in, and again, learn about it and talk to others more importantly, because what you may find is, hey, I thought that was interesting, but probably I'm not sure that's what's meant for me, or that's something I would be interested in. The example I would give is many, many years ago, so about 15 years ago, just on an IPO, and I got approached by a private equity firm. And I talked to a friend of mine who was in private equity, and his name is Chad. I said, Chad, I'm getting approached. I've known you for a while. You're in it. What would you think? And he said, if I know you well enough, you're an operator, meaning I think you're going to get frustrated just looking at spreadsheets and what other people are doing. I know you well enough where you want to roll up your sleeves and try and fix things. And that one comment basically took me in a different path, where what looked interesting from the outside and still is interesting is probably at the time, at least, not meant for me. And I'm glad that I took his advice. Yeah. So I would say, follow your passion, look at what you would be interested in. And again, use your own board of advisors. Every company has a board. I'm sure you've got boards and friends, and those are the friends that you want to look at, who are not just going to nod and tell you what you want to hear, but really challenge you because they know you well enough to give you the appropriate advice.
Yeah, it's something. Thanks for sharing that. That's something how one conversation can really change a trajectory for a person. But it's also, you asked the question, you were curious, and you sought out, someone that you trusted. And so that's just a really great technique to do, just to get, you don't have to follow anyone, but getting more data points, more perspectives. I think that's a good piece of the puzzle as well. So you talked a little bit about just, everyone has to find their own path, but also like curiosity. We talk a lot about on those podcasts is all about continuous improvement and getting 1% better every day. But you lead a very large team and teams and organization. So how, as a leader, do you try to instill some of these mindsets of, hey, don't, just follow curiosity, challenge yourself. There's a balance out, between we got to get stuff done. We have deadlines and goals, and we got to be secure and safe. But there's also like, we want to learn and we want to test out new things and new ideas, and there might be some mistakes and learnings along the way. So how do you find that balance, and how do you like shift a large number of people to that more of that curious mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, in full disclosure, you and I have met in the past, a couple of months ago, getting ready for this call. So honestly, it gave me a chance to kind of think about how would I describe it. And I'm a big believer in the rule of 3, but I'm actually going to shift this to 5.
All right.
Because that's how and I hope if you ever get a chance to meet with any of the teams that I've worked with in the past, they will tell you the same thing. I think there are 5 components, Craig. One is empathy and inclusion. So really understanding and valuing the diverse perspective by the team. If I looked at my team today at the bank, they were all in place today. So it wasn't, I came into this new environment, brought in my own team with my own playbook. Right. They're all fairly great senior leaders in their own right, but they were all running different units, and it was the first time that we brought them in as a team. So by fostering this inclusive environment, really, we're able to over-deliver, and that's kind of harnessing the power. The second, on my side, the reason I took this role also is back to your point around continuous learning. There are areas, if I think about what I manage today, mortgage and lending, while I have been in financial services, I never really worked in that group before. So to me, it was an opportunity to learn something new, and that's part of my personal ongoing journey. And that's something I encourage with the team. And in bringing them together, we've offered a way to offer more transparency to the team so they're learning from each other as well by curiosity, asking questions. Nothing is off limits in a respectful way, obviously. But, if I have 5 teams, some are probably more mature in their processes than others. So why go through the same mistakes? Why not learn from each other? The third is empowerment. And that to me is really, I put it in the middle in a sense, but really it's kind of one of the cores. Give the tools, give the resources, have them come up to you with good ideas, but support them where they need it to succeed. My job isn't to challenge them on it's a good idea or a bad idea, because I know that, we're all at least where I am today. I'm speaking about 2024.
Sure. Yep.
At a point in our careers where there are no bad ideas. It's a matter of prioritizing. No one's come to me in the last couple of years with a bad idea. It's more, where does this fit in the priorities? Let's use automation and AI as an example.
Sure.
Automation AI is probably going to have a better weighting than something else. But at the same time, is it something else that we're going to put behind necessary? So, but empowering them to come up with the ideas is really key. The fourth is EQ, or emotional intelligence. It's vital for building a strong relationship. Everybody's smart, but being able to balance that intelligence with that EQ, aligning our values and considering the broader impact in everything that we're doing on the large teams that we're managing is really key. And that actually is something that you can measure quantitatively by the results, the engagement scores that you get from teams. So we're always trying to explain to teams the why. Why are we doing some of the things that we're doing? Why are we focused on automation? Why are we focused on efficiency to drive better value for the bank? And, last but not least, integrity, ethical behavior. Those are non-negotiables, right? You don't last in the financial services industry the way we do in our careers. So you got to make decisions in every single day, everything that you do that align to our values, and considering the broader impact for the reputation of not just the bank, but your team and your own reputation as well. So those are the ones that I try and really focus on as a team and drive it. And, again, we have an ethical hotline, right? So if somebody made a comment that gets reported and you look at it and say, shoot, I shouldn't have made that comment, right? So you offer also the tools for our employees to do it that way.
Wow. That was a lot. That was a 5-minute MBA, Souheil. So thank you. That was great.
No, seriously, Craig, I really mean this. I appreciate you kind of planting the seed with that question, because it's hard to summarize, right? You want to throw one off the cuff, but I know hopefully you're going to have a lot of listeners that to me is really key, and you try and act it every single day. And I think having a list is one thing, but being able to act it every single day, and I think is really key.
Well, I mean, I think you just touched on it, but I love having the goals that are aspirational, like that you can aspire to, but you can maybe never quite reach, because there's always room for improvement. There's always room to get better. And so I think yours fit that very, very well, because it sounds easy in some cases, but to live it and breathe it every conversation and then test it. Like you said, you have a hotline. So do we measure it? And can we prove it? And you always learn from that. Really good stuff. Well, Souheil, that time's flown by, but the last question, which is just stepping back from day to day, your role, leadership, the bank, and just as a person, you've lived a lot of experiences in your life going back to your childhood. Just what kind of things would you give back to kids growing up now, or wish that you knew when you were a young person, that life lessons, 1% better kind of things that you've learned along the way? What would you say?
This one, I will keep it correct to the rule of 3.
Okay.
And, again, I mean, those are things that, I witnessed through my parents, through the good mentors that I've had throughout my career. Somebody asked me a couple of days ago, and it's funny, it's based on a movie title, what's your favorite saying? I said, pay it forward. And hopefully I'm doing that here with you today. Three things, Craig. One is embrace change, right? Having lived through a civil war that changed every single day, having to, live through many things in my career, in my life, having lived in different countries, like life is constantly evolving and you have to be adaptable to be able to navigate the ups and downs. So that's one. The second one is, you can't live life on your own. So valuing the relationships is absolutely key because they're like the cornerstone of fulfilling your life. So whether it's your significant other, your family, your kids, your parents, your mentors along the way, people that you've dealt with that helped you without you knowing it even. Meaningful relationships, meaningful connections is absolutely key. And the third is practicing gratitude. That to me is one, I've tried doing it. I'm never good at it. And it's a profound impact on me being able to, if you invite me to this podcast, I can send you a quick text that says, hey, Craig, thanks a lot. I appreciate the time. Versus writing you, so you should know what to expect, Craig. Versus writing you something that's meaningful, whether you go to a party, whether somebody, my friend Chad, who helped me, again, back 15 years ago, being grateful for the time that people spend with you, even if it's just 5 minutes, that goes a long way and it shows that you mean it. So that's something I would say I continue to work myself and I would encourage others to work on. Don't call people when you just need something. Call them or send them something when it's least expected. And that's a form of showing gratitude as well. And those are things that I would say help me, not just in my career, because that sounds selfish, but more importantly, help me maintain the relationships along the way throughout the years.
Yeah, that's all amazing stuff. And so speaking of gratitude, I want to thank you for taking the time and paying it forward. I know you do a lot of work in the community and in different organizations, but taking the time with us and our audience and sharing your great life experiences and things that can help us all get better. So I want to thank you for all that.
I appreciate the time, Craig. And again, good luck and thanks for putting the podcast together in the first place. So I appreciate you.
Thanks, Souheil.